Presiding Officer, and I certainly welcome the increased powers of the Public Services Ombudsman under this bill and the inclusion of the Assembly in the appointments process. I was very supportive of this when it came before committee last term, and I look forward to scrutining it in our committee when it comes forward. We firmly believe that the Ombudsman should be accountable to the National Assembly for Wales, not just the Welsh Government. So the Welsh Conservatives are pleased to note that the nomination for this role will be here through the Assembly. However, I'd like some further clarification as regards how members, the National Assembly for Wales will feed into all levels of the nomination process for the Ombudsman and not just the final stages of appointments. In terms of accessibility, we do welcome proposals to remove the requirement to make a complaint in writing and for the Ombudsman still to be able to initiate investigations. Only other 5 members of the Council of Europe have Ombudsman without this power, so this is in fact long overdue in terms of bringing Wales in line with the rest of the UK and Europe. In ensuring objectivity with regard to this power, how will the provisions in this bill draw a clear dividing line between the Ombudsman commitment to representation and the Welsh Government's priorities? And how will this bill ensure greater Welsh Government and public service acceptance of investigatory outcomes? Now, the current model complaint policy in Wales is voluntary, and the Finance Committee previously noted that adoption across the public sector is not consistent. So firstly, what consideration might be made for the statutory basis of guidance issued by the Ombudsman to apply to private health services as well? And following on from the open data debate last week, this particular new power will mean that we will be able to collate regular, reliable and comparable data on complaints across the public sector. Secondly then, how will this data be collected to ensure a concerted drive in accountability and transparency in public services, empowering the scrutiny process? And finally, how will best practice going forward be determined? Will we be able to scrutinise best practice examples from around the UK and further afield to ensure that public service complaints are efficient and effective as a result of this bill? And will this be reviewed as part of the 5-year review by this Assembly? I thank the work of thank the committee and the chairman of the Finance Committee, and I thank the Cabinet Secretary for receiving this in good spirit, and I look forward to working with everybody in my part on the committee and when it comes to scrutiny here to ensure we get this right. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair.
Yes, thank you, and I thank Jonas Finch Saunders for her comments and her broad welcome for what the bill proposes to do. Can I say at the outset that the bill is based on the current, does not change the current legislation in terms of the accountability of the Public Service Ombudsman to the National Assembly, not to the government. He currently is an independent ombudsman and appointed for, I think, still several years to go to the end of his appointment. I can't quite remember when he came into post, something like 2013, I think, 14. The bill makes specific assurances that his appointment is not broken by passing this bill, so we haven't interfered with those powers that are in place. And when we come to appoint a new Public Services Ombudsman, the bill does not change the current arrangements that ensures it's within this Assembly that is responsible for that, up to and including appointment through committee. So I hope that some of the other innovations that we've also had in Finance Committee, for example, with pre-appointment hearings and so forth, can be looked at not only for the Ombudsman, but for the new Auditor General, which is actually the next appointment that will be made by this Assembly. I welcome the fact that you broadly want to see these powers and believe that the verbal complaints powers, own initiative, which I think is one of the more innovative powers there, but it's used by, as you said, by other ombudsmen throughout the Council of Europe. It's not unique in that sense, so we need to understand that international comparisons. I'm sure if the Ombudsman was here himself, he would talk about the network of ombudsmen that does exist, and there are international conferences and they do come together. In fact, I attended one in Aberystwyth last year to hear from other ombudsmen about how their work was done. I think the particular issue around data collection, I think it's important to recall that the Ombudsman makes an annual report to this Assembly, which is scrutinised, I think, by the committee you sit on, but is available to all Assembly members. You would expect that annual report, if this bill were to become law, to include that data, to include the data comparison. There is certainly allowance made in the regulatory impact assessment for some of the costs that might come about that. And of course, you'll have some initial setup costs to make sure you have the infrastructure in place to allow that to happen. But the clear lesson of that is, Finch Saunders' final point was, I think, how that then informs best practice. And we want to see that reflected in Ombudsman's annual reports going forward. And you're quite right, in the bill itself, there's a specific requirement for the Assembly to do a 5-year review of the bill and its operation, but that does not in any way hinder any other review being done by any committee of the Assembly or any external body that might be commissioned to do that. And I think in terms of the model policy, that is a voluntary, as you quite rightly said, a voluntary system at the moment. I think by putting it on a more statutory footing, we'd have a gold standard, which I hope that, for example, private healthcare providers would then want to be part of the gold standard, because that in turn would show how they were playing their role in meeting citizens' needs and meeting the needs of the people of Wales.